So I think everything's working out. Had some technical difficulties. Just give me 1 second. I'm gonna confirm that everything's working here. Yep, all good. Okay. 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 All right. So sorry about that. Let's get right into it here. So today, basically the subject in question, or I should, start by saying this is Thomas Pepin, NHL Talk with me, Thomas Pepin, and we'll talk about the NHL. So today we're going to take a look to see if Toronto is the Bermuda Triangle of for NHL goalies. So basically, to have a look to see if it's where they go to uh, die an unfortunate death. Maybe that's a bad analogy, but uh, of course, it's in jest. So we'll have a look here at statistics over past years since the NHL lockout in 0405, and I'll go over the criteria of which ones we'll take a look at. Basically, starters or uh, goalies that take on some load of games, and we'll have a look to see if their performance before going to the Maple Leafs was good or better. They go to the Maple Leafs, they get worse, or um, they, or I guess, and or they turn out retiring or disappearing or what have you. So, anyways, we'll have a look, and then after that, we'll talk about the Murray Samsonov tandem there in Toronto to uh, kind of consider if they're good enough tandem for Toronto to, for one, make the playoffs, and second, win the Stanley Cup. So um, that's kind of the plan for today. So let's get into it here. So we'll start from, I guess we'll start in chronological order. So give me 1 second. I'm just going to pull up the data in another format just to make this a bit simpler to navigate. All right, so we have starting in the 05-06 season, Ed Belfour and Michael Telkvist. Now, Ed Belfour was nearing the end of his career anyways, had a really strong career, obviously, one of the best of all time. So uh, he's probably not worth analyzing, um, given that basically he retired immediately after. And yeah, we won't really consider him one of the goalies that could have been impacted by playing in Toronto. So, and Telkvist, we will consider. So we'll pull up his statistics. So he was a Toronto draft pick. He did go on to play after Toronto. His only real season where he played any number of games was in 05-06. played in, or well, yeah. So we'll go by games played. So he played 25 games. He had 10 wins, 11 losses, and his save percentage was .895. So his previous 2 years with Toronto, approximately the same. But I guess we can add this to the tally of things not going so well when you play in Toronto. After playing in Toronto, he essentially was a backup based on his numbers, but went on to Phoenix in 06-07, played 30 games, approximately the same winning percentage, 11 wins, 11 losses, 3 overtime. Save percentage went down, 0.885. But more or less it's the same. Now, given that he's a backup, you take a look at the rest of his stats, you'll have to take into consideration that he's not going to play as much. So 07-08, essentially same winning percentage, 0.908 save percentage. That's a pretty substantial improvement. And next year, 15 games played, same winning percentage, approximately 0.907, so an improvement in save percentage. And then finally, that same year, 08-09, played in Buffalo, 0.928. So, play in Toronto, don't play too well. Outside of Toronto, play well. And I guess you can basically, as most hockey fans would know, save percentage is the primary dictator of if a goalie is playing well, because you can have a good save percentage on a bad team. It's just a question of how many pucks you're stopping. Mind you, you'll have more difficult shots, but nonetheless, your save percentage should be good if you're a good goalie. So, not good. We'll add 1 to the tally there. Next, we'll move to the next goalie. Giguère, Jean-Sébastien Giguère. He played in 41 games, 17 wins, 18 losses, 6 ties. Overall save percentage with the Leafs, .906. And then we'll pull up his stats before and after. So, as I'm sure you guys know, he was a heck of a goalie when he played in Anaheim. He did play for a few years after playing in Toronto, so it's not like he just retired. But he was getting towards the end of his career, so something to consider. So, like I said, in Toronto, save percentage .906. Prior to Toronto, I'll just kind of go year by year. And of course, while his winning percentage was pretty high for most of the years, we'll say, I'll give you an example of his best year. 36 wins, 10 loss in Anaheim prior to Toronto. Save percentage basically ranged once he became a starter, 0.911 up to 0.922. So compare that to Toronto. Again, 0.906 consistently was better over in Anaheim. Gets out of Toronto, Colorado, his best year there, 15 wins, 11 losses, 3 ties. And for those years, 0.919, 0.908, 0.913. So, again, another person that didn't experience good stats in Toronto had good stats elsewhere. So, That's 2 for Toronto, not being a good place for goaltenders in the NHL. All right. Next one. Raycroft. Him, I remember him very specifically. Find it quite funny. So in Toronto, 39 wins, 34 losses, 14 ties. Save percentage .890. Now take a look at how he was before Toronto. Played in Boston, played quite well in Boston for most of his years there. Best year 03-04, 29 wins, 18 losses, 9 ties, .926 save percentage. Now, mind you, he kind of hovered around his Toronto stats so for the rest of the year. So .890, he was plus or minus that, mostly plus. 0.897, 0.918, 879. So I mean, pretty consistently above Toronto. Stats go down in Toronto. Played a few more years after Vancouver, Dallas. 0.911, 0.910, 0.898. Again, quite a noticeable difference, both for the most part before, definitely after. Was a backup for the most part for his career. But yeah, not a good experience in Toronto. That's 3 for 3. Not very good for Toronto so far. Another funny story, Vesatoskala. If you remember that goal from center ice that bounced on him, as a person that played goalie all of my youth, it's not an easy shot to stop. But if I recall correctly, it was too deep in his crease, didn't put his body in front of the puck, kind of self-inflicted, but it's very representative of playing in Toronto where things just don't go well for goalies. So let's have a look at his stats. So in Toronto, Vesatoskala had 62 wins, 54 losses, 20 ties. Save percentage .894. So, and I don't know if you're noticing a trend there. All those save percentages are not quite good. So usually goaltenders want to be, well, nowadays 0.91, but definitely above 0.9 if you're a backup. You need to be getting some important wins when you're playing in the net there. So, yeah, not looking too good. Toronto stats, played in San Jose before. Funny, take a look at the numbers. 0.927, 0.93, 0.901, which is closer to Toronto stats, 0.908, again, noticeably different. Best year there, San Jose was 38 games played, 26 wins, 10 losses, 1 tie. Man, those are good stats. That's pretty darn good. So move over into Toronto, like I said, that's where he's got that .894 save percentage. And then a goalie who played quite well in a backup role, played 6 games after Toronto. That's it. So essentially his career ended. Wasn't old. And funny enough, in Calgary, .918 save percentage. Another one. Go to Toronto to really screw up your career. All right. Next one. We got Curtis Joseph. He was towards the end of his career. I'll just double check that he didn't play much after. Yeah. No, he didn't play anything after. So we'll chop him off the list. Kind of unfair to judge his stats and Toronto, excuse me, Toronto's impact on a goalie's stats in his case, because he's right there at the end. So, next one, a guy that's supposed to be a stud of a goalie coming over to the NHL after playing in Europe, Jonas Gustafsson. Man, another guy. I already know you, and if you know much about the Leafs, the Leafs' history with goalies, another guy, not a good time. Let's have a look at his stats here. So, in his stint in Toronto, 16 wins, 15 losses, .902 save percentage. Not horrible. Winning not very good, but yeah, not the best of numbers. So starts in the league with Toronto, which is not a good start, but we'll see. You know, be a cautious optimist here. Moves over to Detroit. Stats not that good to start off. 0.879 through 7 games. Small sample size. Plays 27 the next year. And there's the stats go up. So 16 wins, 5 losses, 4 ties. 0.907. Improvement on save percentage. Not too many games next year. 7 games, 0.911. Save percentage, Boston. 24 games played, 0.908. Improvement on Toronto. Edmonton, 7 games, 0.878. Now, I'd say it's tough to say. His career save percentage is 0.901. So if you contrast that with Toronto, his career save percentage is better. Had some wins more so when he wasn't playing for Toronto. It's really tough to say in this case. So we'll actually categorize, because of course I didn't know this beforehand. No prep work here outside of setting up the statistics. Didn't look through, so I actually don't know the answer to these questions. And we're kind of seeing as I go through this here. So undecided, we'll chalk them up there. So still not one goalie for a good experience in Toronto. Not looking too hot. Next goalie on the list, Reimer. Now, it seems as though every time you listen to the Maple Leafs broadcast, they're always bashing the goalies. And Reimer, I don't know how many times I've heard people say that he wasn't playing well. Him, I know, having seen it, some of his stats previously, I think we'll see. But I think we'll be surprised about how good of a goalie he actually was in Toronto. Mind you, I might be proven wrong when I take a look at the stats here, but I'm pretty sure he's one of the better performing goalies that have played in Toronto in recent years. But let's actually have a look and figure this out here. So, his career in Toronto, 85 wins, 76 losses, 23 ties. So, winning percentage not that hot. Save percentage 0.914. That's decent. You're a serviceable goalie at that point. That's a decent. So, in fact, he did play well in Toronto from a save percentage standpoint. But with the Winds not looking so good, well, tells you the team's probably not so hot. So let's have a look here. I should say, of course, he started his career in Toronto and then went elsewhere. So first stop, San Jose, only 8 games played, .938 save percentage. Big improvement over his stats for his duration in Toronto there. So moves over to Florida. 0.92, 0.913, 0.9. And in those years, played 43 games, 44, 36. So he did play enough games where those stats are pretty relevant there. So again, you can kind of see, for the most part, an improvement on his stats as soon as he steps out of Toronto. Also played in Carolina, 0.914 through 25 games played, 0.906, which is a slight regression versus Toronto. In his next year, San Jose is where he's currently playing, 0.911, approximately Toronto, same as his Toronto stats. So for the most part, actually, let's take a look. Career save percentage. Let's see here. 0.913. So that tells you right there his career save percentage is better elsewhere. But it's close. 0.911, I believe it was. Where was that again? Sorry, 0.914 in Toronto. So actually, yeah. So he had a better time in Toronto, more or less the same. I'd chalk him up for undecided because it's 0.1% difference in statistics from his career average. So you can't really say that that Toronto had a negative impact on him. Next up, Scrivens, I believe, is on the list. Give me 1 second to double check here. Yeah, Ben Scrivens played in 28 games for Toronto, 11 wins, 14 losses, 2 ties, 0.91. Another goalie that played actually pretty reasonably well in Toronto. Let's take a look at his seasons elsewhere. Started his career in Toronto, of course. Went to LA, 0.931. Huge improvement to save percentage there. And that's through 19 games, so similar sample size. Went to Edmonton, and I think this is where he started to have a bit of difficulty. First year, 21 games played, 0.916 save percentage, so still better than Toronto. Next year, 57 games played, 0.890 save percentage. So had a big drop there. Montreal, 15 games, 0.906. So you take a look at his stats there. In Toronto, elsewhere, looks very similar. So we'll have to have a look at his career stats again. 0.905 is his career average save percentage. And Toronto, 0.91. So you can say that basically had a decent time in Toronto. And I'd say enough of a difference where you can say that he had a good experience in Toronto. So chalk the first one up for a good time in Toronto for a guy that didn't play much, but nonetheless, Ben Scrivens had a decent time there. All right, next up, Another goalie that was supposed to be a savior there in Toronto, Jonathan Bernier. Let's have a look at his stats there for his time. So he played 151 games, 59 wins, 68 losses, 17 ties, 0.915 save percentage. Now let's have a look elsewhere. So LA is where he started to get his reputation there. Primarily a backup. And so some of his save percentages were 0.913, 909, 922. So didn't play that much, 25 games, 16, 14. So was a backup. Good stats for a backup. So brought over to Toronto, was expected to play really well. And let's have a look here. So like I said, 915 save percentage in Toronto, quite good, So all things considered, looking up for his time in Toronto. Similar stats prior. Take a look after. Went to Anaheim, 915 save percentage. Colorado, 913. Detroit, 904, 907, 914. And New Jersey, 902. So looks like he played better in Toronto, but let's take a look at his career average there. Career average 912. Again, time in Toronto 915. So it's close, but I guess we can chalk it up to a good time in Toronto. I thought it was going to be worse in that case because he had a hard time in the media. Winning percentage was bad, below 500, but good save percentage. So God knows how he was bashed all the time in the media there. So let's move on here. Next one up. Another good goalie, in my opinion, that got bashed in his time in Toronto is Frederick Anderson. So his save percentage in Toronto was 914. Good save percentage. Played in a lot of games, 268 games. And look at this winning percentage. 149 wins, 74 losses, 36 ties. That's quite good. Nearly, actually, no. More than double wins over losses there. And all the time people were talking about, oh, he's not good enough goalie. How could you treat him like that? No wonder why he's not playing in Toronto anymore. But anyway, so good save percentage in Toronto. Still, we need to contrast his other time elsewhere to see if, in fact, he had a good time in Toronto. So just prior to Toronto, he was in Anaheim. 28 games, 0.923, 54, 914, 43, 919. So you compare that to his stats in Toronto. He was playing better before he got to Toronto. And some really good seasons for wins there. He had 20 wins, 5 losses, 35-12, 22-9. That's quite good. Gets into Toronto there. And had that 914 save percentage. Gets out of Toronto, playing in Carolina so far, 0.922. So big chunk better afterwards. So it's tough to say here. Have a look at his career save percentage, 0.916 versus 914. pretty darn close. So I would say really playing in Toronto wasn't good or bad for him. Pretty much similar to his time before and after. So yeah, not so bad of a time in Toronto. Let's see if there's anybody else here I'm missing before we get to Jack Campbell. Yeah, we got a couple more here. So Garrett Sparks, his time in Toronto, short-lived, 37 games, 14 wins, 18 losses, .898. And I think he only played in Toronto for the most part. Yeah, so most of his starts are in Toronto. Played one game in Vegas in 2019-20 and 2 games in LA 21-22 season. So not playing much after Toronto. Kind of came in, I think, to fill in the blanks there for a little bit. So we'll say undecided on that one. Peter Mrazek, we'll talk about him briefly here. 20 games, 12 wins, 6 losses, no ties. Save percentage with the Leafs, .888. Before Toronto, played quite well, all things considered, in Detroit. Some of his heavier years for starts, 29 games, .918, 54, 921, 50, 901, 22, 910. So again, his time in Toronto, .888, consistently above, not even close. Moves over to Carolina, Philly. After Detroit, 891 through 17 games. Carolina, 40 games, 914, 40 games, 905, 12 games, 923. So goes into Toronto and just tanks. Career save percentage, 909. Dramatic difference, .888. Definitely not a good time in Toronto. Let's see if there's anybody else here worth noting. Yeah, you know what? Since he's still active, we'll talk about Michael Hutchinson. Played enough games there with Toronto. So 30 games played, 10 wins, 15 losses, 898 save percentage. So he's been moved around a fair bit here. Started his career with Winnipeg, 38 games, 914, 30 games, 907, 28, 903. Doesn't really get too many starts before he gets to Toronto. 3 more the next season, Winnipeg, 4 in Florida, 907, 839 respectively. Goes into Toronto, 5 games, 914, 15 games, 886. Goes to Colorado, plays 1 game. Back to Toronto, 8 games, 919, 2 games. Well, 857, but I mean that's a small sample size. So career average .905. Toronto average 898. Enough of a difference. Didn't have a good time in Toronto. All right. And then I think that gives us all the goalies there. Worth noting. No, we'll talk about McElhaney. So Curtis McElhaney, he played in 32 games, .925 save percentage with Toronto, so quite good. Career average is noticeably lower, so that one I kind of knew because he did play pretty well in Toronto. So 907 average career. And like I said, in Toronto, 925. So I think you can chalk him up for a good experience in Toronto there. And then, yeah, we'll end off with the most recent goalie to be chased from Toronto, Jack Campbell. So he played in 77 games, 51 wins, 14 losses, 9 ties, 916 save percentage. Those are really good goalie stats there. Played in LA prior, 31 games, 928 save percentage, 20 games, .900. So his career average 916, average in Toronto. Again, 916. So right on average playing in Toronto. And I mean, that winning percentage is outstanding. So he had a good time in Toronto. But just heard today listening to TSN, some of the analysts saying there, oh, he was up and down. Like, what do you expect out of a goalie? 51 wins, 14 losses in his time in Toronto. Like, give it a break. What are you trying to do to these guys? And of course, he doesn't stay in Toronto. Goes over to Edmonton. Like, how many different goalies here that played 20 or more games in Toronto? 17 since 0506. So how many years is that? 06 to 22 is 16 years. You're averaging a new goalie a year. That tells you right there's something wrong. Of course, all those 17 goalies playing 20 or more games, keep in mind, that would include backups there. But 17 goalies with 20 or more games in that span. Yeah, that's not looking too good. So, to go over the totals here of if goalies had a good time. So, good experience. You got 4 there, where it's basically a toss up. 4, not good. 6. So, it's close. So I thought it was going to be way worse. To be honest, I thought that they were gonna mostly have had a bad time, but Toronto's had some good teams recent years. So I mean the goalies should have had relatively good stats. Likewise, I mean they've had some tough years. And you know what? On that note, why don't we just bring up some of the team stats there, and we can have a look at their performance during that time span. So let's look 0506 to last year. and narrow it down just to Toronto. So So 0506, 41, 33, and 8. And then going from there towards today, 40, 31, 11. 36, 35, 11, 34, 35, 13, 30, 38, 14, 37, 34, 11. So you can see there's a few years that are not the hottest. A bit of up and down here. 35, 37, 10, 26, 17, 5, 38, 36, 8, 30, 44, 8. That would be a year that you'd expect a goalie not to do so well. 29, 42, 11, another one. Then that's where it flips to basically their performance of recent years. So 40, 27, 15, and 16, 17. 49, 26, 7, 46, 28, 8, 36, 25, 9, 35, 14, 7, and 54, 21, 7. So they struggled towards the beginning of these times. And so, I mean, you don't expect goalies to play that well, but they weren't treating their goalies that well. Well, they haven't been treating their goalies that well for this whole time frame. Like, do you name one of those goalies that was spoken about highly? Not one of them. Like, I mean, they're touted beforehand as being the next saviors for the team, but as soon as they get in there, they just get stomped to the ground and they leave the team. So, yeah, it's I just they don't treat them well in Toronto, despite good enough goaltending. I mean, 4 times a good experience, 4 times essentially up in the air where neither good nor bad, 6 bad. So I don't know. If you take a look at all that, the amount of goalies that have come and gone, nobody's wanted to stay long term. Anderson is the longest term of all of them, 268 games played through how many seasons was it in Toronto? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So, I mean, played a chunk of games there. He's the only guy that's played any long term in Toronto. Reimer's the next closest at 207 games, and then it just drops. So 16 years, 17 different goalies playing 20 or more games. Doesn't look like Toronto's a good place to play. So I'd say if we're trying to answer the question, is Toronto the Bermuda Triangle for NHL goalies? I'd say no, but surely doesn't treat them too well, at least from the media, even when they play well. But in the balance of all of it, Toronto is not considering the media and what we just took a look at. Toronto is not a good place for goalies, we'll say. So, on that note, we'll just briefly cover. We had a question from somebody that was watching the first stream. Let me pull that question up in the exact wording, so just bear with me a moment. Question was, the new goalie tandem in Toronto won't be good enough to make the playoffs? Well, if you listen to my last stream, I have them on just on the outside of the playoffs. Really high end scoring. As I mentioned in my algorithm, I have them ranked 6th in scoring, 28th in goaltending. So their team save percentage is not looking very good. 905 pulling in the 2 goalies there. Weighted average, like I said, with my algorithm, I take a look at the 5 years and weight things according to what I see as the biggest predictors of team performance. And their averages over the past 5 years, Matt Murray 904, Ilya Samsonov 902. So that's not good enough stats for a team to win a Stanley Cup. Like, I mean, you would have to outscore the competition by crazy numbers if you get that kind of goaltending. It doesn't look very promising. Now, when we speak specifically of Murray, let's pull up his stats here over recent years. I mean, he hasn't played that well after his time in Pittsburgh. Ottawa wasn't very good to him. In 2020, 2021, 10 wins, 13 losses, 1 tie, 0.893. Next year, 5-12 and 2, 0.906. So that's not that bad. But in his second year, first year, you can't win games with that kind of goaltending. And so he started Pittsburgh, 13 games, mind you, but 0.930 save percentage. 49 games, 923. 49, 907, not that great, but still reasonably good. 50 games, 919. And then this is where he started to deteriorate in his performance. 38 games, 899. So, I mean, the whole time though, he was getting wins like 32 and 10, 27 16, 29 14, 20 11. He's got good pedigree. If he can get back to that play, Toronto's got a shot of making the playoffs, definitely, because they're in the bucket, like I said in the last stream. They're on the bubble, in my opinion, to make the playoffs. If he can bring up some of his previous performances and get back on track, yeah, Toronto can make the playoffs. Can they go deep? Man, he's got to get back to his peak performance for that to happen. And then let's pull up Ilya Samsonov. Him, I know already his stats weren't that great, but career NHL stats 902. You can't win with that. Like, best season, 26 games, 16-6, 0.913 save percentage on a really good Washington team. I mean, it's a good Toronto team, but you're really stretching looking for him to carry the load. So not looking good recent history for Murray. Samsonov, likewise. Man, like I said, according to my algorithm, 28th in team goaltending. So going back to the question, is the tandem good enough to make the playoffs? No, I don't think so. But if everything goes great, maybe, yeah. They've done it on good teams. They played well enough on good teams before. They can do it again, but recent history is not looking good. So don't hold your breath, Leafs fans. So anyways, I think that covers everything for this time. Thanks for tuning in. If you like the stream, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notifications to let you know of the next one. And on that note, I already know the subject of tomorrow's stream. We'll take a look at the Detroit Red Wings, what they did in this past off season. Steve Yzerman's track record as a GM and if he can turn them into the next Tampa Bay Lightning. So I think that's going to be an interesting thing to take a look at. I hope you will too. I hope you tune in. Of course, this is all brand new, so not any viewership at this point, but I hope you guys like the content. And if you have any comments or suggestions, leave them in the comments there. So thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you tomorrow, and have yourself a good one.